Hi there. In this video, I'm going to step back for a moment to look at the wider state of the industry for streaming TV platforms. Because this affects how many shows get greenlit and which don't. Now, obviously, my channel is specifically devoted to the World of Westeros franchise, but it runs on HBO Max, well now Max because of the Warner Discovery merger. And things like those mega mergers affect the health of the platform. If the platform is succeeding, we get more spin-offs. And conversely, if they had a really bad year full of flop projects, Disney plus Marvel, they might start cutting back. So how well Warner Discovery is doing relative to its rivals, what they're up to, this affects everyone. I meant to do this right after New Year's, but, I was backlogged with all the other stuff we were doing for House of the Dragon for the lead up to Dunk and Egg. I just went through that they cast the leads on Dunk and Egg and the teasers on that, but this is my looking ahead to the future thing now. And I meant to follow it with, I'll link this at the end, that I had this state of the content that we got, what were the best shows in 2023 by platform, and I felt Netflix had a pretty weak year overall, behind even Disney, whereas Amazon and Apple did surprisingly well, though I still think Max had the best out of all of them. In terms of had Succession, had a couple of other things. Now keep in mind, not only is the streaming boom officially over, and everyone was scrambling to get their rival to Netflix starting late 2019, we are now in the bust period, where everyone is realizing they overspent on content, everyone trying to get their flagship, their Game of Thrones expand. More importantly, they ranked success based on subscriber count. And only belatedly did they realize, wait a minute, this doesn't equate to revenue. And it never will. They can, the revenue will come eventually. Right now, there was some logic to, we have to grab up the viewers now. The money can come after we squeeze out our competitors. But the boom period ended in spring 2022, when Netflix posted a dip in subscribers for the first time, when Warner and Discovery had to merge, and there's been some reorganization around that. And of course, everything came to a head with the writers and actors strikes. They weren't getting paid enough because the corporations were squeezing everyone while still thinking, no, the revenue is coming, the revenue is coming. You need to actually pay your writers and actors. You need to, more importantly, pay money to train the writers in how production works. You're giving yourselves record bonuses, and the money isn't going to come next year. This is the budget you have. Stop measuring success in subscriber rates. The condensed version is, if nothing else, I saw this really, really good article in Variety on December 1st. I'll link it in the description box below, but I figured keep this simple, the fewer references the better. That I could have barraged you with a bunch of citations to prove, no, I'm telling the truth, I'm telling the truth. At a certain point, you wouldn't read them. It's overload of information. This isn't a lawsuit. I don't need to cite everything like I'm in academic article mode when this is supposed to be quick summary mode. So one article to go through. And I'm really just cut and pasting the chart they had in here. Because the article was going over state of the streaming wars and how it is shifted from subscribers to revenue now, and these companies are not turning revenue. So I briefly flashed you the chart for this is the relative subscriber numbers, that the top three, Disney, Amazon, Netflix, have a little over 200 million subscribers. Max has about half of that, but it's growing. And then there's the also-rans who have less than that. But it's shifted to revenue. How are they doing based on that? I'm going to read off this chart of they actually know their revenue for the last year and their projected revenue for the next 2 years. And from this, we can discern 4 major news points. So to keep this concentrated, 4 news points when we're talking about the state of the industry for the streaming wars. That the big thing is some other news site ran this big article going, Netflix has officially won the streaming wars. And while they did have the best revenue of the year, things are by no means certain. So let me read off the chart really quickly. Now, this number is actually based on operating income, which is when you take the raw revenue minus your operating expenses, which is actually a better gauge of how they're doing when they overspend on things that actually don't have a good profit ratio. So I kept saying revenue. I really mean operating income, profits. On top of that, this is not including taxes, not including a bunch of other things, but this is all relative. This is their chart, good gauge, operating income. Yes, Netflix is the first one to have a really good profit again, even though people were freaking out 2 years ago when they had a slight subscriber dip. That when the streaming wars began, it was a race to spread to every region around the world to get as many subscribers as you can. The big ones have hit the saturation point. There are no new territories to spread to for the top three. Max has not spread everywhere yet, like they're having a big launch in Europe later this year, in France. But the big ones like Disney there are no lands left to conquer. Where are you going to get money now? But in terms of the profit margins on this with the operating income, Netflix had an operating income in 2023 of $6.7 billion. For 2024, they're projected to have $8.6 billion, and 2025, $10.6 billion. So they're clearly in the black. You know, the phrase, if you're in profit, you're in the black. If you're in debt, you're in the red. That's the marker colors they use when you're making revenue charts. Disney, on the other hand, 2023, their operating income was actually negative $2.5 billion in 2023. That they are $2.5 billion in debt. Projection for 2024 is that that debt will decrease to $677 million, and that by 2025 they will start turning a profit at $849 million. Obviously, this is a projection, but they're in debt now, but they're projected to be gaining money within 2 years. Okay, there's sense that, well, we needed to spend money to expand. We're easing back on the expansion now. That's what we're doing. Warner Discovery. While there have been criticisms of David Zaslav, I never felt he was acting irrationally. And I've talked about this in other videos. I know people hate on him. I really feel a lot of that is unfounded. He's done pretty well by the World of Westeros franchise. That Zaslav has said we need a lot of belt tightening and we need to cancel a lot of things because we overspent. Now keep in mind, I'm used to years of dealing with his predecessors who would just throw money at problems and didn't seem to understand where money comes from. This was a massive problem at Time Warner going into when they had to be sold to other owners in 2018. That they were just throwing money around. Just where do you think this comes from? And I've done other videos on this. I did this other one on the decline of the HBO Max originals, where the guy they put in charge of that, Kevin Riley, essentially just tried to make every single show an HBO quality show when they told him to make cheap shows with better profit margins like TBS or something. And he didn't. And there's all these quotes in that from a different article on, you don't seem to understand where money comes from. It was a big problem. And within that same article, in that other video, they were pointing out that a lot of the things Zaslav is canceling now are things which were greenlit by his predecessors 2 years ago, which could never have turned a profit. That the reason there's a cancellation wave now is you tend to wait after the second season of a show to see how it's doing. That he gave them a chance. And I regret that we're losing shows like Our Flag Means Death and things, but like this thing has a high production cost. We gave it 2 years. I do hope they get, like, they said it was only going to be a 3-season show, but that's not the best example. But other things where it's just, who was going to be, you literally thought that Julia show, the Julia Childs show, that was supposed to be like a Succession level show. And who greenlit this? What market research was there? So yes, there's been a lot of cancellation, but it's that delayed ripple effect of we are seeing this year, well, end of last year, the aftermath of all of the bad decisions when HBO Max first launched in 2020. They need belt tightening. In some cases, you look at the math and go, we should take the tax break for not releasing this. The profit margin just isn't there. I don't agree with every decision Zaslav has made. But in principle, yes, through all this belt tightening, he has managed to take what was officially the most indebted corporation in the world back into the black, back into profitability. More than Disney. Yes, by not releasing a lot of stuff, but he did manage to turn it around. He's doing well by us in terms of the core franchises. The numbers are that 2023, Warner Brothers Discovery actually did turn a profit of $153 million. Yes, there was a lot of cuts, but it worked. He managed to turn it around. For 2024, the projected operating income is $289 million. So 153 million, then 289 million, and by 2025 it spikes, and they're projected to go up to 1.1 billion. That it'll increase by a factor of 5 2 years from now, is what they're projecting, based on projects they have in the pipeline and international expansion waves that they haven't done yet. They expect Warner Discovery to actually be doing better than Disney again 2 years from now. That Disney's doing, they're already doing better than Disney. Disney's 2.5 billion in the hole. But even Disney will only get up to like $850 million 2 years from now operating income. They'll be up to 1.1 billion. That you have to look at things in terms of 2 to 3 year timescales instead of just what is happening now. And there have been all these scares with Warner Brothers Discovery stock prices going really far down because the last report on their revenues was really low because, dude, there was this 9-month writer's strike. Of course their profits were going to be low this year. Or are you going to stick it out for, well, 2 or 3 years from now they'll recover from this? This was an unnatural thing in the flow of business. Then we have the also-rans. Now, not also-rans when it comes to Amazon. They mention this, and comes up in other charts. Amazon and Apple do not release their operating income data. So they're not on the chart at all, and it's largely irrelevant because they're not standalone companies like Warner Discovery or Paramount. They're subsidiaries of these big other multinational companies, a shipping company and a tech company. So Amazon Shipping could keep running Amazon Prime Video at a loss just as a promotional tool if it wanted to buoy it up like that. Similarly, I don't think Apple TV Plus is very profitable, but, it's Apple Computers runs it as a gimmick for, hey, buy our computer products and get exclusives on our in-house content. And they can keep doing that as long as they feel like it's a good promotional thing, so it's not measured by the same metric. Though I must admit, Apple has had surprisingly, as I said before, my review of 2023, they had surprisingly good science fiction genre stuff in the past year. They're turning into what, like Sci-Fi Channel and IFC were 20 years ago, where this is where you go for the niche genre things. And it's smaller, but it's kind of found its footing there, as that's what they're doing. So it's not trying to compete with Netflix in the same sense. So we don't have numbers for Amazon or Apple TV Plus. We don't really need to. That they could keep running at a loss as a promotional gimmick. But then at the bottom of the list, you have Paramount and Peacock's parent company, NBC Universal. Paramount was negative 1.7 billion this past year, 2023. 2024, operating income is projected to be negative 1.3 billion. So it's debt of 1.3 billion. And even 2 years from now, 2025, negative 629 million. Then you get to Peacock, which I don't want to link you to too many articles, but there's a point where they actually bragged by 2023, the rate at which debt was increasing leveled off. That it's no longer accelerating the debt, but you're still in debt. You're not turning a profit. It's not increasing, it just slowed down the rate of decline. That their numbers for last year were, I'm not going to give you enough scale 5 years, but for 2023, NBC Universal was negative 2.8 billion. Projected for 2024, negative 2.1 billion. And for 2025, negative 1.5 billion. And the funny thing is, since the streaming wars began, because NBC Universal with Peacock was very late to the game, for almost 2 years now, a lot of news sites were empty speculating, and I believed it. Peacock and Comcast owns NBC Universal. Oh no, Comcast is sort of waiting and husbanding their resources and waiting for the other big studios to fight it out. But they're saving their money to eventually buy out one of the other ones, like Paramount or something. I increasingly realize that's not going to happen, that they're not just, that whole thing of, oh, the little guy at the edge of the fight hasn't done anything yet. Wait, he's biding his time, waiting for an opening, then he's going to do something really cool. I believe that for 2 years. Now I realize, like, Peacock just doesn't really have much going on. That Comcast isn't waiting on its money to buy Paramount. Well, then what? It's not like that would make it that much bigger. Peacock actually did have some original content that was noteworthy this year, but it's not a platform that's worth it. So that's the state of the industry in terms of revenue and the projected operating income for the next 2 years. I'm basing all this on one article, the one in Variety, and if you want, you can check out the other video I already did on how, yes, it was smart for Warner Discovery to be canceling things that really weren't that profitable. Zaslav is behaving rationally in that respect. And this is important now because it is the 2-year anniversary this week of when Discovery bought Time Warner, and now they're free to enter into other mergers again. That there was this 2-year moratorium on, if you have a merger that big, you have to wait 2 years before you buy or sell anything else, and everyone's waiting on what their next move is. So this is everything by the numbers. But what are the 4 conclusions we can glean from this and other stuff going around in the news? Point 1. Someone has to buy Paramount. That originally I was going to make this in December when Warner Discovery was sending out feelers for, they had a meeting of, hey, can we buy Paramount? And people were going, oh, Zaslav's trying to gobble up Paramount. Paramount came to him. Paramount wants to sell, they're not a profitable company, and he was one of several potential buyers. And if someone's going to buy it, it might as well be the guys that have the World of Westeros franchise, which I cover, because having a lot of content is good. And then other people argue, well, it's more than they can chew, they'd be buying it at a loss. That hurt their stock a little, so okay, maybe it's better that Warner Discovery doesn't buy Paramount. And herein lies the problem of part 1. That first, the thing in my notes here is it says, guys, someone has to buy Paramount. Even the Redstone family, who, like, if you watch Succession, the Roy family is a loose amalgam of issues facing the Murdochs from Fox News and the Redstone family, one of those big power families that owns a media outlet. Even the Redstones want to sell now. And it's been this whole back and forth the past few weeks to them. Everyone kept going, oh, all the news sites of, oh, Warner Discovery will buy them up. No, Comcast, Peacock will buy them up. Turns out the other streaming companies are in such a bad place financially that none of them can actually afford to buy Paramount. That the unequal merger, aka buying it, that the Paramount would still get some of their own stock back, but they can't do that. It's too much to bite off because everyone else doesn't have that much money either. It's like having a yard sale in the middle of a depression. Like, well, your neighbors can't really buy it either. So what are you going to do? Now, one thing that has been floated is that Paramount might sell off subunits of its assets because they weren't bundled. Like, BET was never formally incorporated into Paramount Plus. Their film studio, like, different subunits might be sold off differently. The thing they're actually trying to do right now is the movie studio Skydance is trying to buy them. But then there was this whole thing in the past few days, this is news in motion right now, of that the board of executives felt it was an unfair deal, so they're trying to get out of it. We don't know what's happening with Paramount. I used to think it was a sure thing that, okay, maybe Warner Discovery will get them, we're not sure. Probably Skydance now once they wrangle through all the red tape, but big point is there are federal rules against merging broadcast companies. Yes, broadcast TV still exists, but the big ones are CBS, NBC, and ABC. And technically CW, but CBS owns that, and Disney bought Fox, and it was controversial that ABC bought Fox, because Disney owns ABC, but basically three now. That, while not impossible, there'd be a lot of red tape if Disney tried to buy Paramount, because they have CBS. And similarly, Peacock, Comcast, even if they could afford it, would also be really red tape. Versus Warner Discovery doesn't have a broadcast company, so there's less red tape if they buy it, but now there's a question if they might not be able to afford it. Well, they could, but that whole thing, no, buy up all the content now. The profit will come eventually. Or they could strip it for the core titles, we don't know, but more likely Skydance will buy them. But the big thing, just number one here, someone has to buy Paramount. It isn't a profitable company. They might even divide it up. It's not that Warner Discovery Zaslav is evil. He was one of several potential buyers because they're up for sale. But no one can afford to buy them, so now they don't have a plan. What's going to happen? That's point one. Paramount. Point two. Important stuff now. That thing I mentioned that the news site declared Netflix has won the streaming wars, when Netflix itself, to their credit, doesn't think that. They are more cautious than that. Even though in my review of 2023 TV, Netflix originals were god-awful in 2023. They had a string of flops. But they still had record revenue, operating income. How the heck did this happen? I mean, the numbers are here. You look at the chart, it's an entirely different scale. They are nearly $7 billion profit. The only other one that's profitable is $150 million for Warner Brothers Discovery. How does this even happen? It is something like 50 times as profitable. They have a really good infrastructure in place. Out of all of the streamers, even more than Disney or Amazon, they're the only one that really has the algorithm set up in such a way that they can really manage shifting around international content. I mean, case in point, Squid Game. That, well, if there's a writer's strike in America, we'll get a bunch of really good Scandinavian murder dramas and South Korean dystopian Squid Game things, and we'll use the algorithm to match it to people who are into that kind of genre. Other streamers just don't have that infrastructure. And in many cases, when they realized it would cost more to, expand Disney into a certain region than to simply pay Netflix a licensing fee to run. That's when people said it was all over, when you're running Disney and Warner content on Netflix because it's cheaper, because they have the infrastructure somewhere. And the other companies are saying, well, that's just a stopgap measure for the moment, but they admittedly have that infrastructure in place that even if their original content is crap, or a lot of it is crap, they can shift things around. And before you yell at me in the comments, Netflix actually has a lot of good shows. They have Wednesday was very good. It's like one of their top 3 shows by viewership rating. Sandman adaptation is amazing. But they gutted their animation department. They had a couple of other flops that weren't really good ideas. So, it's not circling the drain. It's just there were some big stumbles last year, and ever since Cindy Holland left, their old programming director, I don't know if they really know what they're doing. And a couple of their big shows ended, like The Crown, Ozark. We'll see what happens. But the core of point 2 here, Netflix itself in other news outlets, and this is what the article talks about, Netflix itself publicly acknowledges that it got such high revenue this year due to luck or quick fixes that worked only once and will not work in the future. That they're not blindly rushing forward. They are aware of how precarious this is. Specific things they did, which were, one-time actions to increase revenue, but which they can't do again. The big thing they cited is 2023, Netflix had a big crackdown on password sharing, which probably had an effect on subscriber count, but they've played that card. It won't be played again. Another big thing is they introduced an ad-supported tier for Netflix. And trade secret that ad-supported tiers usually aren't directly profitable for Netflix or Warner Discovery. They break even. But they discourage piracy, and the idea is more people will sample it ad tier. It's like handing out samplers, that the sampler at least breaks even with ads, but it does encourage more people to then upgrade to actually paying for it. So indirectly, it does lead to some subscriber growth, but not directly. It's a promotional thing, and it does work. So they said password crackdown in 2023, introducing an ad tier in 2023. And on top of this, as I was talking about, 9-month-long Writers and Actors Guild strikes meant that the platform that had international content to easily redirect to people would do very well. In contrast, like Apple TV Plus does not have international content, does not have unscripted content. So Netflix, it has diverse enough unscripted content or international dramas that it managed to weather that strike pretty well. But those three factors, the strike is over, the password sharing crackdown is over, and okay, we have an ad tier now. That's not going to happen a second time. So Netflix itself acknowledges we didn't win. We did really well this year. What are we going to do next year? And they do have plans for the future. They're not just resting on their laurels. I don't know about the original content part of their company. They made some bad decisions, but the business end actually knows what it's doing, or at least is self-aware enough to go, look, that was a one-time thing. And I don't know if this is a good plan for the future, but it is a plan. They have acknowledged, we played our cards, what are we going to do next? Big plan for Netflix coming up in the next year or two is to get into video game streaming. Like, they look at all the live video game streaming on Twitch, on YouTube stuff, and went, there's money there that we could make that we're losing. All those Twitch broadcasts, those should be on Netflix. We should co-opt that. And given how much volume there is, how the extent of the video game live streaming, that's a decent idea to at least explore. Second thing they want to do is they signed a 10-year exclusive deal for live wrestling. World Wrestling Federation, not the Olympic sport wrestling, but, Monday Night Raw wrestling. Which is pretty big for them because of all the major streamers, Netflix is the one that's lacking the most on anything even approaching sports content. They really don't cover sports stuff, and I know, well, is wrestling sports? It's entertainment, but point is, they signed a big deal for we are now the home of wrestling, which is popular, and they're trying to get into video game live streaming in the future. So, Sword of Damocles and all that. Netflix acknowledges we haven't won. We did well this year. We need new plans for next year. We'll see where that goes. Point 3. Disney stumbled in 2023. Point 3 is Disney. Disney stumbled in 2023, clearly. But if you actually read through all the interviews, they're not just stumbling forward blindly now, that they had some missteps, but I have seen them having articles about how they're implementing behind-the-scenes reforms to fix these problems. So as opposed to when the old-time Warner were circling the drain and just going, well, throw money at it, and that isn't a plan. There were some problems at Disney, but they have had real things you can point to of, okay, these are fixes we're doing, specifically for the Marvel franchise. That, this is a second article I guess I should link to, but it was more than one article of after the burnout on Marvel TV shows, because they were cranking them out, they did reforms behind the scenes, which are a little shocking when you realize what they were doing. That they've acknowledged we need to retool these things and start running the Marvel TV universe as television shows, where we have pilots and showrunners and writers' rooms. That they would basically run these things like a long movie. And the attitude with movie, and this is a whole thing in the article, with movies, we can fix it in post. You can do some quick reshoots, do a lot of editing, and fix the movie. I mean, heavily rewrite large sections of it in post. That's physically impossible for a TV show simply due to its size. Like, you can fix with reshoots and editing, like, we've heard the original cut of Star Wars Rogue One wasn't very good. So it was significantly better by the final cut, or even like the Han Solo movie was not an embarrassment to me, even though we heard it was a dumpster fire. There were some reshoots, and it's pretty decent. It could be better, but like I've heard examples of when reshoots drastically improved a movie and increased its quality. You can't do that. You can do things with a 2-hour movie that you can't do with an 8-hour television show. You can't fix it in post. That you need to actively plan out things. And on top of this, they treat all of their TV shows as one-shots, which meant the individual writers and directors and crew members didn't get to build that much work experience from a pragmatic, real-world point of view. On top of that, they couldn't have really extensive storylines when it's a one-shot season. In contrast, look at how good Loki was, because they planned it out as 2 seasons. It was meant to end with season 2. That there is a longer story arc at work, and their idea was, well, they're crossovers, but the story arc is the overall story, and just no. This wasn't leading up to it. This isn't, they're all subplots of the larger meta show. No, you weren't treating it like that. In terms of the missteps they had with shows that went nowhere in the past year, particularly Secret Invasion, that I'm actually in favor of having crossovers, but it's still, you need to have something to cross over with that's worthwhile. But Disney itself has acknowledged these problems, and they said there were major shakeups behind the scenes after this backlash, after Secret Invasion bombed, after, I don't know how they spent $200 billion on She-Hulk, which wasn't that bad, it's just not $200 million. So while Disney stumbled in the past year, they have very clearly implemented reforms. They're doing everything they should be doing to fix it. And the projected revenue reflects that all the news sites think they're going to turn it around. That's one thing, and hopefully they're doing the same thing with Star Wars, but the Marvel thing of that they bled Marvel dry, that you can't run it as glorified movies, they have to be run like TV shows, more decentralized. Another big thing Disney is doing, another big problem they've had, is they've had trouble stepping away from their core franchises. Because other than children's content, which obviously there's this whole plethora of children's content, they got the Bluey, they got all this other stuff on there. For adults, their core dramas are basically Star Wars and Marvel. They're solving that because in 2024 they're absorbing Hulu. Hulu used to be this joint venture between all the streamers, now they've bought up Hulu, and they're incorporating it into Disney+. It's not just bundled, it's now just part of the menu. And Hulu, which is tying in with FX and FXX, all those nice experimental dramas on FX, a lot of those kinds of shows are going to be promoted a lot more through one combined streaming platform. I'm looking forward to that. Just other, think like What We Do in the Shadows, a bunch of other little drama things. Like, I really liked that Legion show, which was loosely an X-Men thing. Other X-Men content they can work in there. But things unrelated to the Marvel and Star Wars universes. Case in point, what I'm really looking forward to is Legion's showrunner Noah Hawley is doing a Alien TV show. Not Alien Romulus, that's a movie, that's something else, trailer just came out. He said he is working on a TV show set in the world of, Ripley and the Xenomorphs, aliens. I thought, well, what could he do with it? He said, well, I want it to be new, so it's mostly focused on the corporate conspiracies with Weyland-Yutani, the evil corporation. I'm like, yeah, well, we've already done the alien stuff a lot. He wants to focus on, the intrigue and stuff of the corporation like that. Have you ever seen James Cameron's Aliens 1986? He went, I want to explore the world of Weyland-Yutani more as a TV show. Okay, a lot of this is that Noah Hawley really proved himself to me with Legion. But the point is, that is a big flagship series on the horizon that isn't Star Wars or Marvel, which will now be part of Disney Plus because they absorbed Hulu. Or Disney Plus will get Futurama now. They didn't used to run as much with their Simpsons stuff as much. So the two problems Disney was facing of we need to expand our content, we need to improve the content we have like Marvel, they're taking steps for that. So there were stumbling points, but they're doing everything that now at least they've assessed it well and are doing everything they can to improve it. So point one was Paramount, point two was Netflix, and point three was Disney. Fourth and final point is how is Warner Discovery doing, which affects us the most. Let me shuffle my notes here, because this channel is for the World of Westeros franchise, and we want them to succeed, so we succeed. Because right now they're middle of the pack, whereas like Paramount's doing so bad it has to be sold. Peacock, we've realized, isn't, if they were going to do something, they would have made a play by now. Apple just being held up as a promotional thing, but Max is trying to be the fourth essential streamer. I used to not like Amazon a lot, but damn it, they have really good content. They got the Has-Been Hotel, they got the Fallout. They got a pretty good, decent slate of content on Amazon, I must admit. Even if, I don't like everything they're doing, but Amazon had a healthy slate of content last year. But Max is trying to be the fourth big one, and they're making all the right decisions pretty much. So, three things for Warner Discovery. First point, which I already talked about a lot earlier, just getting into it, is they made a lot of cuts because they were necessary, that there were projects greenlit 2 years ago they really shouldn't have. And while I do disagree on one or two of these points, on the whole, I do see that there needs to be belt-tightening, and they're not doing what the prior owners did, which I was disgusted with, of how much overspending they were doing. If you've actually been with us this whole time of just how much they were throwing money at things, most indebted company in the world. So, the belt tightening has worked. They've gotten back to revenue just from that is point one. Point two, international expansion waves that haven't happened yet, which is something the other big ones can't do. Unlike the other big three, this fourth one, they still have room to expand internationally. Everyone else hit the saturation point. They're already in every country. Warner Discovery still has to do expansions in Europe, in Asia, that they're gradually rolling out, and that'll increase their numbers. Third and last point for Warner Discovery, a good idea they've had, pretty big news past few months. They're going to start a new joint streaming platform with Disney for sports. This combined sports streamer, which they described as sort of like Hulu, what the original Hulu was, where it was shared between the three major networks. It's going to be like Hulu for sports, combining ESPN from Disney with all of the sports content that Warner Discovery has. Like Warner Discovery has a lot of basketball, a lot of NHL stuff. ESPN has a ton of other things. Oh, I wrote this down of ESPN has NHL, college stuff. Max has the NBA, baseball with MLB, NHL, some college stuff. Amazon, meanwhile, has they have a couple of things. They have WNBA, women's soccer. There's some tennis things. Paramount and Peacock at least have some football. But again, that's the thing I was talking about, that Netflix conspicuously has no sports content. So now, arguably the two biggest sports carriers, Disney and Warner Discovery. Amazon has decent stuff, but if Disney and Warner Discovery pool their sports stuff into this combined streamer, it'll hit Netflix in their weak point, that they don't have really good sports packages for them. So in terms of that, and on top of it, we can see projects that Warner Discovery is building up to 2 years from now. I've said 2 years from now is when they will have multiple Westeros shows on at the same time in the same year. Within the same calendar year, you'll have one show in spring and one show in fall. We're not going to get that right away because it takes time to build things. That right after House of the Dragon Season 1 was a hit, they said, okay, you need to start writing the other shows, and that takes time. And then there was a writer's strike that shut everything down, shut down work on Dunk and Egg. So that's why House of the Dragon Season 2 is this summer, but Dunk and Egg isn't premiering until late 2025. But then 2026 we're going to get like House of the Dragon, then Dunk and Egg in the same calendar year, on top of what other projects like animated projects and movies they're working on. They're retooling to focus on franchises, the core reliable stuff, which is the smart move during a downturn. So overall, they are making good decisions with that, and we're not looking at, oh my God, sell all the stock right now. There was a bad financial report right after a writer's strike. You think? We're looking at 2 years down the line. I see Warner Discovery doing pretty well. As for the other ones, we can't predict Amazon because Amazon runs it at whim. Seems to be they're going to keep supporting it. Disney is making the right moves to turn itself around as well. I'm not really sure what's going on with Netflix because technically they're top of the heap now. But they have acknowledged they have played all their cards, need to find other things, and their content packages, their original programming has been a bit mixed. Like, Avatar Last Airbender live action was decent, but not a breakout new Stranger Things. A lot of their better shows ended. What will the future hold? I'm not sure, but this is the state of the industry we're looking at now. And in this state of the industry, Warner Discovery wants a lot of Westeros shows. They want their Westeros cinematic universe to compete with all this other stuff. And on the one hand, what are they going to do? Because on the one hand, if they don't have a lot of money, they can't spend on a lot of new shows. But then the argument is they'll spend a lot to make a lot. Well, maybe they'll order a lot of shows because they want them faster. I went over this in my video about the Targaryen Conquest theatrical movie of maybe they couldn't afford that, but then on the other hand, maybe they really need it sooner instead of later to drum up more business. Hard to say. Do you save money or do you spend money to make money? I'm not really sure what they're going to do with that. Complete X Factor now because, as I said, this is the 2-year anniversary of Warner Discovery merging, and now their hands are untied to do other mega mergers if they want to. That's why they were actively talking about things with Paramount. I don't think they're going to get the Paramount thing, but what is going to happen in the future? Well, near term, that's why I made the video on international expansion waves for Max coming in 2024, which is something we can point to of the big European launch by May, and then a month later in France in time for the Olympics. How much of a boost will that give them, expanding into these new regions and then Southeast Asia at the end of the year? They're trying to get into Australia and the Sky Atlantic parts of Europe by 2025. Next year, they're hoping they can get a deal in place to be in the UK and Germany and Italy, which could change things around, but they're not, despite all the doomsayers, oh, Warner Discovery has all these problems, like, they're pulling from behind, but I see them making some pretty smart decisions here. And when they succeed, we succeed. Because it's our interests dovetail beautifully here. They are the distributor, we are the supplier. We want their World of Westeros cinematic universe.